Internet. I'm Shawn.
And I'm Frank.
And it's Monday night, which means that it's History and a Drink night. So we're located here at the world famous Baha'i Hut again. And Frank, this series that we're doing, we're actually traveling around the Caribbean, talking about different locations and talking about rums.
Right. And this week we are traveling to Barbados, which is one of the most southernmost islands in the islands that are out, the Leeward Islands. Yeah. And Barbados, it has been a British colony for a really long time. And when I was doing the research for it, the history, I just didn't have anything that really jumped out at me that I thought would be fun to teach. So,
now, one thing though that they do drink a lot down there are being a rum drinks. Our drink for tonight is the pina colada.
Exactly.
So cheers to you on that. Exactly. Delicious here. So rum down there. What rum are they famous for?
Well, the rum that we're going to talk about is Kraken rum.
Okay.
And since we're talking about the Kraken, I decided that why not go ahead and talk about those sea monsters.
Sea monsters and from history all around.
Yeah, and mythology and stuff like that. Especially when I was growing up, my grandfather, he's a sailor, and every time he would come over, he would have a shot of Crown Royale. And when he would have that, when we were really little, he didn't tell us it was liquor. He told us it was dragon medicine, because when he was out on the water, he would see a dragon, the Lake Erie monster, and that's what he needed it for. I think he had a few of those too many, and that's how he saw the Lake Erie
normally
monster.
It's the next monster, the next morning you're dragon.
Right.
Anything, so.
Exactly. Yep. So we'll start off with the Kraken, because that's what we're talking about here. And this one is kind of in lots of different mythologies and stuff like that. And it's somewhere between a cross between a squid and an octopus, depending on which history you're talking about and stuff like that.
And some of these creatures that we're talking about, some of these monsters, it's not just one culture that came up with a story. That's what we see them across multiple cultures, across even the world and time frames as well, to where it makes you kind of question, maybe there's something more to it than just telling a story.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you have these things over and over and over again, how can they just be coincidence? Right. So the most famous depiction of the Kraken, though, is probably from Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the Nautilus gets attacked by it, and the fight with that and everything.
But once again, we see this tentacle that's this combination of a squid and an octopus.
Right. So its origins come out of Norse history.
Okay.
And so, but this one in Norse history, it was many-headed and had lots of claws too. So we think of it as kind of that octopus squid combination, but this one was a lot different in Norse mythology.
But that's where the name came from.
Right. So we see it in a lot of those the Norse, the Irish, the Scots, the Celts, all of that area up there. So it makes sense that they shared some of those stories and stuff like that. But there was really kind of three famous sightings of the Kraken that made it lore amongst kind of the European sailors during the 1500s on.
Okay.
Right. So there was a group of French sailors that were down by the coast of Angola, by southern part of Africa, and they swear they saw a ship being attacked by this giant octopus.
And that famous scene you always see where the tentacles are coming up over the bow and pulling the ship down.
Yeah, and so that one is kind of the first one, and this is called the Angola octopus episode. Yeah. And then there's a story about a French ship of the line. So this is a big, almost like a battleship of the time, called the Ville de France. And
Ville de Paris.
Oh, de Paris. Thank you.
Yep.
And so she is sailing out, and people see her getting swallowed up by the sea. But the thing that makes this story even more interesting is 10 different ships went out there to rescue them, and none of them came back.
So whatever it was causing it.
Right. So whether it was a Kraken or whether it was just a horrible storm or whatever it could have been. And then the most recent one that they talk about is the Niagara. And this was in 1813, and they were traveling from the Caribbean to, I think it was England, and they're in the middle of the ocean, and they see this huge, what they estimated to be 200 feet long creature resting on the top that had all these seashells over it and lots of birds and stuff. So now, to me, that sounds more like a dead whale or something like that. So, because when you think about like the blue whales and stuff like that, some of them are pretty massive. Yeah. So, but we see the Kraken a lot in pop culture today. It was really brought up in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies with Davy Jones.
Davy Jones called it the Kraken and
So we get to see that come back over and over again, and just the fun part of it. Yeah. So then probably after the Kraken, or probably the most famous of the sea monsters, are the mermaids.
Oh, so see, I wouldn't necessarily call them monsters, but at least in my interpretation. But
well, it's interesting because the interpretations of mermaids is they lured sailors to their death.
Okay.
So it's not like the Little Mermaid from Disney, all right, where she's helping and marrying Prince Eric, blah, 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 crap, right? These were vicious creatures that hunted the sailors and stuff like that and lured them to their death.
Pulled them from the ships and drowned them.
Yeah, and they are also tied with the idea of omen and prophecy. So if a sailor saw a mermaid, the idea was that there was a huge storm brewing and was coming that way, or for the fishermen, they were going to have a really terrible catch. So it's kind of interesting to see that idea.
It's a very bad luck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right now, we come here to the Americas, and there is a creature that people kind of believe are the mermaids. And here in Sarasota, we're lucky we can see them quite regularly, and that's the manatee.
The manatee. Now, I don't think I'd have to be at sea a long time to confuse a manatee with a mermaid, but I could see what that would be.
I don't necessarily think you need to be at sea for long. I
maybe
just
drink
think
a
you need a
lot
lot of those. Yeah. Right? But there, and then there was there was two larger varieties of it called the dugong and the stellar sea cow.
Gotcha.
Both of those are extinct now, but they were in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and places like that. So that's another place where we see a lot of these stories come from. There's a lot of ideas of the mermaid in Japanese, Chinese culture, Korean culture. Mm-hmm. But again, we see this tons of pop culture. You know, I think of the movie Splash from 1984. Yeah, exactly. Then we have the Little Mermaid in the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Even down to theme parks here in Florida, Wiki Wachi, where you can go and see the mermaid swim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, kind of tied to that are the sirens. Okay. So that comes from Greek mythology, and their voices lured sailors to their death. Now, it's interesting because the sirens are depicted as a half bird, half human, right? So it's a bird with a human head, but they're also sometimes talked about as being part fish.
So kind of that tie with the mermaids, kind of intermixing between the two of them.
And they're most famous from the Odyssey and from the story of Jason and the Argonauts. But in Greek mythology, the sirens always happen either in 2, 3, or 4. So it depends on the stories, because some of them say there was only ever 2. And they have specific names for them. And in different stories and different myths, they have it where the names get mixed up into them.
Gotcha.
So it was really kind of interesting to see how stories can change, because this was through oral tradition. It wasn't written down, and how that gets passed on. But it's that beautiful song that brought the sailors.
And unlike the mermaids that were depicted, well, somewhat, more attractive, the sirens you never saw. You just heard their voice, and then until you got close to them.
And then they killed you.
Then they killed you.
All right.
Loads of fun.
I want to hop back to Norse mythology for a little bit here.
Okay.
And so if you know your mythology about Loki, Loki actually has 3 children with a giantess.
Gotcha.
And one turns into a wolf, one turns into a serpent, and then the other one, I don't remember what the other one was, but
Gotcha.
but so the serpent gets thrown into the water by Odin.
Okay.
And it keeps growing and growing and growing, and eventually becomes known as the Midgard serpent, or the world serpent, because it surrounded the kingdom of Midgard, and
Which was Earth.
well,
Okay.
I think it just
Could
is
be,
a
yeah.
it's the area where the Greek or the Norse gods lived.
Gotcha.
So, but it grows so big that its tail met its mouth and it hooked on, and it just became this continuous circle around it. And this creature is the one that is tied with the end of the world story for them, or Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And when the serpent lets go of its tail, that means the world's going to collapse. And there has been stories of battles between Thor and the sea creature, right? Where he actually cuts off the head of a creature and to try and fish for it and whatever.
Gotcha.
and everything. But what was really interesting is there's almost an identical story out of Indian mythology with their god Indra fighting a dragon that is kind of the same thing, a sea dragon.
And once again, we see these stories across different cultures
Yeah.
that never met, that never came together, but you
Yeah.
know, it's the same story.
So then, when we think about Judeo-Christian beliefs,
Okay.
we get the idea of the Leviathan or the Behemoth.
Yeah.
They're kind of tied to each other.
Sure.
And in Jewish culture, what those at the end of the world, those will become the food for those who are righteous and are going to go to heaven. But we see it as a depiction of a sea serpent. And you talk about the story of Jonah being swallowed by the great fish,
the whale,
depending on the translation that you're looking at. But it's referenced in a whole bunch of the books that are in the Old Testament. It's in Psalms, Job, Isaiah, Amos, right?
Yeah.
And it embodies the idea of chaos, right? And it is said that it's going to eat the damned in the afterlife, right? But we also see it tied with one of the 7 deadly sins of envy.
Now, see, and also too, when I think of Leviathan, I think of that, I think of a giant fish or a giant whale,
right?
Which also ties me to other pop culture,
right? And that's Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And the idea of that, the white whale, which is your nemesis forever, and if you let it, it will destroy you, and that kind of stuff. So, but again, this idea comes up in lots of other mythologies too. So that was the thing that I found most fascinating about looking at these things, is how many different mythologies kind of are intertwined. And if you take the names out and the stories are so similar.
Yeah.
So there had to have been a lot of cross-culture
sharing of ideas,
and stuff. Now, we were talking about the idea of the Kraken too, and it's that giant sea monster. And so if you've seen the movie Clash of the Titans, that's who Perseus uses Medusa's head to kill the Kraken. In the story, it's called the Cetus, to save Andromeda. So again, we're seeing it in the Greek mythology
different names,
too.
But the same creature.
So then I moved on to Japanese culture and stuff, because they have their own kind of belief system.
And
about
still a
this.
very, very nautical people. I mean, they're
right.
an island, so surrounded by water.
So they have two ideas. They have the kaijin, which are the seaman, or like the merman, or whatever you want to call it. And then they have the kaiju, which are these huge mythical monsters.
Godzilla.
Exactly. Godzilla and Mothra and all of those guys. But we have seen them that in pop culture today, in the movie Pacific Rim, bringing that idea back in these different creatures and stuff like that. So they believe that the Akai Jin had this humanoid appearance, and they show up as early as the Edo period, which is about 300 years ago in their culture. And so they start talking about them, and they talk about them being like greenish color like the water, and kind of like able to shift their looks a little bit as well. And that leads us to this other one that I thought was interesting, which was the seal folk, right, or the Selkies. And
that's much more of an English Irish tradition. So North Atlantic.
Yeah, and the idea is that they can be human, but to be human, they have to shed their seal skin and they become human. And then they can shed their human skin to become seal again to go back into the water and stuff.
I know of them. Part of some stories with them is that when they lose that skin, they have to hold on to it tight to become back a seal again.
Right.
So if someone were to steal their skin, they would have to stay human forever.
Right. And in one of the books that I learned about by Ernest Marwick, which is the folklore of the Orkney and Shetland Islands, that's one of the stories where a young boy steals that and puts it on and goes and becomes a great fisherman for the people there and brings all these fish back to them because he can go and swim like a seal.
Gotcha.
And then the last one I have for today is the hippocampus.
Okay.
Now,
not the hippopotamus.
Well, and they're kind of tied together because the hippocampus means sea horse.
Okay.
And the hippopotamus means river horse. All right.
Yeah.
And so, and if you really have watched how a hippopotamus is in the water, they walk on the bottom and stuff like that. Yeah. It's like they're just
cruising along.
Yeah, they're not swimming. So, and I say that because I've been watching a lot of video Fiona and the hippos up in
Cleveland
Cincinnati Zoo. So, but this one has the body of a horse and then has the lower part of a fish. And when you think about it, we have real things like that, seahorses today. Yeah. But this one is huge and could be ridden. And in Greek mythology was ridden by different gods and by sprites and nymphs and all of that kind of stuff. So, and it had, instead of having hooves for the front, it had fins on the end of its the feet. Yeah, so it could swim. So, as we look at it, there's all these different kinds, and that kind of brings us to our rum that we're looking at tonight.
Gotcha. Which is tonight is, once again, we're traveling to Barbados, is the Kraken rum.
Yep. And so I think when they were creating this, they just took those stories and they ran with it.
I'm sure.
So on their website, I was looking at it, and the legend has it, is this way their story begins, is that there was a ship carrying a bunch of rum that was traveling out of the Caribbean, and the ship gets attacked by the Kraken, and the only thing that is saved or that is found is one rum barrel, but it's stained with the Kraken's ink, and the rum is turned deep black, and from there on it's known as Kraken's rum.
Gotcha.
And their kind of catchphrase, it's known as a liquor of unparalleled darkness. So I thought it was kind of funny, and I think it's great that they're doing that.
And the fact that it's 94 proof is also
right.
It could be a
you will be seeing that.
Yes, you will.
So their rum is that good deep black color, and it's perfect for putting as a floater on top of pina coladas like we had today. Yeah. They have a ton of really awesome drinks on their website that you can go and make, and they have some really fun names that they've come up with dealing with the Kraken.
Fantastic. So that was basically our lesson for tonight. Once again, we traveled to Barbados. We talked about Kraken rum that's from Barbados and a little bit of its history. And we talked about our sea monsters tonight. So tied with the Kraken. So for those of you guys on the internet, this is kind of the end of our broadcast for the evening. But for those of you, if you ever can make it down on a Monday night, we're actually going to be at the Bi-Hut. We're going to do trivia right now and have a little fun night for guys with some great prizes, including some Kraken rum. So we'll be good to go. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll see you all again next Monday night. Where are we going to Monday?
Next Monday, we are hopefully going to St. Lucia.
Okay.
that is the one place that really reached back out to me when I was doing it. I'm just waiting for their package. So it depends if we get
which
it.
Which may be some prizes that are coming for our trivia night.
Yeah, and some stuff for us.
Gotcha. So we'll keep you posted on the internet this week, but hopefully next week.
If not, we'll go to Jamaica.
We'll go to Jamaica. Excellent. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.